Crosseyes. It's taken me time to find the courage to talk about this. I guess it's because no one will believe me. Every time I start telling the story to even myself, I can barely believe it. But you see, if you ever look at my face, you'll know I'm reminded every waking moment of every day. I suppose now is the time for a tell-all. I can't let a little thing like a pandemic get in the way of my calling. I record this in secret because I can't risk someone close to me trying to put me away. But I hope someone finds this someday. I hope they can see the evil I see and find a way to act if I fail. It started at the last Christmas party I'll probably ever attend. Our boss, Roger Redmond, was a real character. The guy was really stuck in a different era. I have no idea how he survived in the era of Me Too. I remember he said something in my interview. He raised a toast of some fancy scotch I can't pronounce nor spell before the ink was even dry on my contract. To alcohol. Life's all-natural preservative. Anyway, he was all about classic office Christmas parties filled with liquor, inappropriate comments, and, of course, a convoluted gift exchange game. I was a few drinks in, and I was actually getting into the gift exchange, which combined a guessing game with an adult drinking version of the grade school classic Duck, Duck, Goose. I was jockeying for the wireless head earbuds, but by a quirk of fate, and probably because Chelsea, neat in her dystopian Edison Flight Company embroidered shirt, my closest coworker still, was cheating at the game. I ended up with the most useless prize in the bunch. It was one of those ridiculously illegal, overpowered laser pointers, which had more warning labels on it than most fireworks do. I can still remember all the Christmas story references. "You'll burn your eye out" chant that went up as I misfired the device, and instead of singeing the carpet, it struck me square in the forehead, inches from my eyes. I blinked away the blotches at the top of my vision between hearty laughs and went to the punch bowl. I tried to trade Chelsea the laser for the earbuds. After all, what good were earbuds to her when she planned on dying on Mars and getting her consciousness plugged into a solar-powered computer out there? She told me no way. Sorry, laser boy. I remember feeling sullen after the game. I remember thinking to myself that Christmas might be the only time where I could complain about not getting what I wanted. Not that the earbuds were all that I wanted. I remember my buzzed glaze drifting across the room towards Ahmed. I drank all the punch I served myself, and I was always tempted to tempt him with a drink, but I never did. I knew full well that, like getting those earbuds, that too just wasn't happening. I surveyed the room from the relative safety of the receptionist's desk turned full bar. With the game over, the group dispersed into smaller cliques, and there was a general hum about traveling, about kids, and about visiting family in general. It was then that I started to swirl into a general bitterness I had towards Christmas. Any family holiday, really. I resumed numbing myself to the thoughts I had tamped down around Thanksgiving. I remember telling myself that family was the laser pointer no one asked for or wanted, but it was something you accepted anyway. You didn't toss it out because 15 years ago you came out and told them you were a little different. I wanted to drink more, but I knew that there was a commute back, and between the weather and the fact everyone and their second cousin would be leaving downtown for the holiday weekend, I knew I would have to wait to wreck myself until I got home. I went back to my office to grab my hat, gloves, and jacket, and that's when I was confronted by Mike, the oldest dude in the office. Mike should have retired years ago, but he was good at his job and he loved his job. Mike was the office's accountant, and he played the bit well. Short, a big head, made even bigger by his enormously thick glasses. I was a bit thrown off since I thought he took off about 20 minutes ago. and then he asked me if I would be kind enough to help him jump his car since I was heading out now. I looked at my watch and then I looked at him. His eyes were penetrating yet sunk into their sockets, highlighted by lines and white eyebrows perpetually stuck in sad puppy dog mode. I sighed without sighing out loud, and hid my reluctance behind a buzz, "Sure, just point me in the right direction." I flashed the laser pointer around the office before sticking it in my pocket. It was my way of saying goodbye to everyone in the office, but they seemed pretty preoccupied. I followed Mike to the elevator down to the parking garage, where we got in my car, and he directed me towards his tan 1999 Ford Taurus. He left the hood open, and it was apparent even from 4 car lengths away the vehicle was not going to start. An acrid smoke floated up from the battery, which corroded the contacts and melted away a part of its plastic holder. It was then I resigned myself to offering him a ride home, guilt me by asking for one. About 4 months ago, I gave him a ride home when he broke his thick-ass glasses, and I knew that it wasn't too far out of my way. I just hoped the weather was going to hold. Mike grumbled as he removed his 2 identically wrapped gifts from his car, and he placed them on his lap in the passenger seat. As I circled up to the parking garage exit, I could see the snow was already coming down pretty hard. I had this churning feeling in my gut the ride was going to be eventful, and perhaps I was betting too heavily, as I usually did, that the weathermen were all wrong, that their warnings of a foot of snow was overblown. I've lived in the Chicago area almost my entire life, and there were 2 ways of dealing with winters: believe the weathermen or not. But the fact is, I wish I would have listened this time. Mike had a few annoying tics, one of which was his tendency for the right side of his mouth to sag slightly over time. He would exhale through his mouth, and that little sag produced an annoying whistle. This might have been easily countered by the stereo, but Mike insisted on not listening to any music, and I sure as hell was not going to let him tune into one of his AM talk radio shows. As the snow started to blanket the streets and blot out the cityscape, and his whistling began, I really started to regret my decision to take him home. He seemed to be agitated, and initially I chalked it up to having to leave the car for the long holiday. But as I differed between routes home, he became animated as I weaved in traffic and passed multiple opportunities to get on Lakeshore Drive. After opening and shutting his mouth several times, Mike hissed, "Maybe we should take Lakeshore Drive. I bet the plows have been on that and are working their way in. Here," he said, reaching for the buttons on my digital stereo. "I bet we can get a traffic report." I gently pushed away his hand from the stereo controls, and I immediately flipped on my digital display to get information from my integrated Google Maps. To my amazement, the old man was correct. Lakeshore was moving pretty well at the moment, and I adjusted my course. I didn't thank him for bringing this to my attention, but he did seem a lot calmer after I merged onto LSD. He started to talk about the snow and cold weather. At first it was innocent enough, recalling his experiences with the great blizzards of the past 30 years, having snow day adventures, sledding, making snow angels, getting tipsy at 12 years old because his dad let him have spiked hot chocolate. He paused as a nostalgia trip for a moment and started to stare out towards Lake Michigan. The churning gray inland sea was nearly concealed by a wall of snow driven by razor winds. Then he started talking again, this time taking quite a turn. "You know, a lot of people die every year in snowstorms like this. And you think about it, like, how does that happen? Sure, you hear about some folks dying in, like, a car accident, or if they have a bad furnace or something, but did you know there's a bunch of folks, who just turn up dead? Like, they leave their house, and they find them in their pajamas out face down in the snow for no reason. Why would they leave their house, and why would they leave it so ill-dressed? And the thing is, sometimes they find them miles away from their home, and sometimes they find them here. They always find them laying next to the lake." "That's interesting. I didn't realize you were into the true detective unsolved mystery type stuff." I was moderately alarmed, but I decided in my rational brain that I was overreacting and just tried to brush it off. "It's an obsession for me," he said. I still had half a mind he was going to tell me I'll show up next to the lake tomorrow morning, but I turned away, and then he said something entirely sad. "I lost my wife that way when I was 24. "I'm sorry to hear that." It was a lot like this, actually. We were headed home from my dad's company party. You know, we probably shouldn't have been driving at all, I guess. We got stranded on Lakeshore Drive in the blizzard. And well, like I said, it is a mystery to what compels someone to leave the relative warmth of their cars and homes this time of the year to wander in dangerous temperatures and stray so close to that icy water. He was very vague, but I wasn't going to press him. I had heard the cold does strange things to people. Paradoxical undressing was one of them, and I figured something like that must have afflicted her more than him. The traffic ahead of us was thickening, and then stopped altogether. The snow and wind picked up significantly, and soon all we could see through the slushy glaze left by the wipers of the traffic was a series of dimming, twinkling columns of red brake lights. I let out a deep sigh, and then I held my breath, somehow expecting to be moving by the time I needed to draw breath again, but alas, I would have asphyxiated by the time we did. When we finally started to move again, we only moved a few feet. The wipers were now ineffective at clearing the snow, and the car was buffeted by winds roaring in like hungry polar bears off the lake. My navigational device indicated that the road ahead was entirely at a standstill before it lost signal entirely. Minutes turned to 10 minutes, and 10 minutes turned to 30. My mind went back and forth between abandoning the car and walking across Lakeshore Drive towards somewhere, anywhere, and staying put, hoping the blockage would be resolved. It was almost entirely dark, and the snow was piled up on the car. I wondered if I was going to be able to even get traction if traffic started up again. I was getting antsy and sweaty, and the condensation built up on my windows showed it. I was frustrated. I was scared. Mike, on the other hand, seemed quite comfortable, as he kept his identical gifts tight on his lap. It began to fidget with the buttons to recline and heat his seat. He muttered something of a compliment on the car's features, then helped himself to the radio buttons. A routine of trial and error with the buttons and the digital display allowed him to seek an AM station, which was broadcasting a storm warning and a traffic report. The snow, defying initial forecasts, was going to be heavier and winds stronger, and kept up for at least another 6 hours. O'Hare was practically shut down. The city emergency snow plan was put into effect. Multiple pile-ups, including one involving a bus blocking an exit ahead, meant we were staying put. The deeper dip in the temperature and the wind chill made leaving the vehicle and walking anywhere a riskier proposition, especially for Mike, who, upon further examination, appeared to have no hat and no gloves and nothing more than a thin coat. "This is like a repeat of the Groundhog Day blizzard," I started thinking out loud. "We can keep the engine running for heat until the snow reaches the tailpipe. We have plenty of gas. If we have to, I can get out and move some snow. I wonder if we can get out through the windows if we have to." "It reminds me of '79, Mike chimed in, before his strained whistling. At the moment, the clash popped in my head. Should we stay or should we go? "Go where?" Mike hissed. "We have heat here, and we're in the perfect spot." "The perfect spot?" "Oh, I mean that sarcastically. Where would we walk? To the lakefront? Where's the nearest hotel? Do you really think we can hike up those ramps and down across the snow dune-covered streets and just check in somewhere? Everyone's stuck, and everyone close already checked in. There's no vacancy. There's nowhere to go." "You're not wrong." I sank in my seat. "I just don't like being stuck in the car like this." "Honest question. If you weren't here, what else would you be doing? What's so important at home? Like, no offense, but I know you don't have kids or a partner. Do you have any pets? You're missing nothing, right? Nothing is missing you?" I compulsively rubbed away the condensation on my window and barely registered what he was saying to me. Then it hit me, and I stopped, and I made a full head and body turn, squaring up my shoulders defensively on the old man. I wasn't sure if he was threatening or just being an ass, but I let him know I wasn't enjoying what he was saying in either case. His sarcastic smile faded. I said no offense. In a moment of strength, when I should have said nothing more and continued to stare at him, I broke. You're not wrong. I'd probably be getting home and pop on Netflix and start getting anxious about how I'm going to spend Christmas this year. How do you mean? You've got to have family, right? If they're far, it's not like it's going to snow every day up into Christmas. I gritted my teeth, ever regretting getting up this morning, thinking about being anywhere but here, spilling my guts to an old coworker stranded in a blizzard on Lakeshore Drive. Mike pressed in. You're not like me, are you? Are your parents... My mom's alive. I stopped him. She just... Well, my dad hated the fact that I'm gay, so much that I think his dying wish to her was that when he was gone, she carried on his hate. I don't hate her. I don't even really hate him. I wish she would get over his hate for my love. I didn't choose this. Sometimes I wish we could move on, and sometimes I'm like, screw him. Screw them both. And other times I wish he just changed his mind before he died. I remember I was barely sad when I found out, because he treated me like I was dead so many years ago that I forgot so much about him. Mike adjusted himself in his seat and then leaned in. There's a lot we wish we could say and do and know about someone after they're gone. Maybe in time she'll come around to have some faith. I guess it was the standard response whenever I bring this up. At some point I just rolled my eyes and smacked the steering wheel. Yeah, maybe. One time he gave me the chance to say I wasn't. That it was all a fad or a prank I was playing on him, and of course I was true to myself. Have faith? My dad had faith, and all it does is hurt his flesh and blood. Faith is blinding. I have no faith. I have a truth in myself, and the only person that hurts is me. It's not passed on to others. He never has to say sorry. He just has to stop being an ass for someone who is gone, and we're good. I exhaled heavily after the rant. I felt good. I felt like I had given myself an early Christmas present. I let the subject drop and let the pit-pat of snow blasting onto the car fill the silence for a moment. The entire car felt very small, and as I felt water in the corner of my eyes, I noticed my side of the car was entirely fogged over. Finally, I remembered I left a deck of cards in the center console. I pulled them out, and we started to play gin rummy. About 2 hours passed while we made small talk and played cards. I was getting close to midnight. The snow was getting up there, and the car started to heat up a bit more than I liked, so we started to run the engine less, and the heater only in 15-minute blocks. Mike was kicking my ass at cards, but as the night wore on, he seemed tired or preoccupied, and I started to pull ahead. It wasn't actually too bad. I just wish I had the audacity to stash a bottle of aged rum in the car for an occasion like this, but oh well. I was almost relaxed and almost having fun, and almost thought I might be able to sleep in the car and just trade off with Mike turning the car on and off until the storm broke and the traffic started to move. But each time I wanted to bring it up, Mike seemed even more distracted and on guard. He clutched the gift boxes with his free hand between turns. So, who's the lucky someones? Kids? Grandkids? I asked him about the boxes. He stared out, though little snowless gap in his window, and didn't answer me for some time. I waited patiently for him to answer, to take his turn, to do anything more than what he was doing. What? He asked in a dejected tone. I turned to him. Are you having second thoughts about staying put? No, no, not at all. He shook his head. It's starting. A strong gust of wind jarred the car, and I dropped my cards and became alarmed. What's starting? Another bang, and then another, and another shook the car. In the tiny, snow-free part of my windshield, I saw the reflection of someone's winter jacket pass over the hood of my car. Someone was outside, walking in full stride on my car, and then through the snow. I was kind of irritated. What if they dented the hood? But then I realized they were walking towards the lake. Maybe they needed fresh air from exhaust fumes backing up into their car. Maybe they somehow got disoriented in the snow. Either way, they were walking towards disaster. I figured my windows were frozen up, so I tried to unlock the door and turned to get out, to shout at them to stop walking on people's cars, and to point them in the right direction. I would have, if not for Mike grabbing my right hand. What do you see? He asked. Some jackass who's going to fall into the lake if he's not careful? Nothing else? No. You will. What are you talking about? It knows I'm here, and it's going to get you. Okay, well, maybe we both need some fresh air. Let's get out and get some of that cold air straight on our faces. It's too late. We're committed. When it shows up, when he shows up, you'll know. When who shows up? When what shows up? Your dad, Mike said, fidgeting with one of the gift boxes. He's going to call to you from the lake. What? It's because it's what you want the most. It knows you have nothing anchoring you. It's going to show you that in your father, it will take you in. It will show you the impossible. You'll be intrigued, and you'll look. And the longer you look, the more you won't be able to look away. You're sucked in. Even the pleas of your own loved ones couldn't break its deathly grip once it sees you, and you see it. Okay, I'm getting out. You can stay. I'm done. I'm out. Here's the keys. Dude, you're freaking me the hell out. You can't get out. Not yet, at least. You're in this with me. You're gonna help kill it. I doubt it'll be able to stop both of us. That's it, I said, reaching for the door handle. Don't go, he said, with an odd calm. I have a bomb. I'll set it off. I turned and peered into the package with the lid cracked open. I saw a bunch of lead pipes duct taped together with wires and 9-volt batteries. I believed him. I sat down. Don't talk, just listen. It only wakes up during these kinds of snowstorms. It's like an amphibian. It prefers the icy waters of the lake at this time of the year. And it prefers its prey stranded this close, but the driving snow lets it hide, and it keeps it moist. It knocks on people's doors, and it shows them whatever it is they desire, and the faithless seemingly wander off into the snow, and it eats them. It eats a little part of them, the part it needs to stay alive. And that's how it avoids detection. But after so many years and so many bodies, a few days later they all show up, bodies lined up on the lake shore. The whole city knows it's out here. It's a lake monster feeding on us. It took my wife in '79. 1 minute she was in the driver's seat, and the next, she was out the door wandering off. I'm going after it. I'm going after her. I am St. Michael's. Michael the Archangel. I slay the evil which roams Lakeshore Drive. I don't know what's wrong with you right now, but I want to get you some help. You're not thinking clearly. There's a big problem with your story, Mike. See, if you're right, how are you here right now? How did you survive? Why didn't that happen to you? I couldn't see it. Well, I could. But I could see what it really was. It's hideous. I could see it because as faith would have it, I slipped and fell and shattered my glasses before I got into the car that day. It couldn't get a hold on me. It couldn't tempt me. And it's this protection I've realized puts me in the position to end it. I've been trying and waiting for this chance. I've tried every year we've had a major snow, and I didn't see it. But now it sees you. You're the perfect bait. When it looks at you, you're going to take this gift to your dad. With that, he pressed the other wrapped up gift into my chest. I, of course, tried to push it away, only to discover it was covered in superglue that painfully adhered instantly to my hands and my clothes. Don't rip it. If you rip it, it'll go off. It'll go off when it stabs into you looking for the part of you it wants to eat. I'm dead either way. Why should I listen to you? Why shouldn't I just rip it off and set it off now with both of us in the car? Mike smiled at me, and he told me in no uncertain terms that I wouldn't. And he was right. So I asked him what it was his wife saw, what was better than him, what lured her out into the snow. He looked at me and he said he was going to find out. And with that, he clutched his bomb tight as he nonchalantly opened the car door, letting in an Arctic blast before slamming the door shut and disappearing into the dark. Winds rocked the car, and the whole night seemed to go and let out a long, eerie howl. I frantically turned on all the interior lights using the side of my hands, my 2 free fingers, before pausing for a moment, realizing that I was shaking around an unstable homemade explosive device. So I slowed down, and I tried to lean towards the glove box to retrieve my multi-tool, which I hoped I could use to cut myself free of the tack, and then use my cell phone. I leaned in, and I made 3 efforts to reach the handle before I folded back into my seat. I shut my eyes, and when I opened them again, there was a bright, warm light coming from the lake. It was that calming orange-yellow of a sunrise, and I checked the clock on my stereo, and I was amazed to find out that it was actually 6:30 in the morning. Without thinking, I grabbed the door handle. With my free fingers on my left hand, I slowly pushed my way out of the car. I was amazed. There was almost no wind, and all the snow had stopped. I found myself in a sea of snow-encrusted cars, trucks, and buses spread across 4 lanes. In a picturesque display, I saw a tall figure, spotlit by the calm winter sunrise, beaming across the icy lake. Part of my brain was gripped with complete panic. I knew that nothing I was feeling, seeing, or otherwise experiencing at that moment was real, and yet it was all in my head. It was like the start of an anesthetic, the swirling inevitability of having to let go, of letting go, of just letting go, of being forced to let go no matter how hard you struggled or how bad the pain felt. The panic was lucidity, and I was running out of it. I clashed with the dark and frigid air, power sanding my face, as I took shivering step after step on one hand and a pleasant, warming sunrise walk through placid snowdrifts on the other. The more I told myself I really hated my dad, the more I was warmed by seeing him standing at the edge of the lake, holding a brand new winter coat he had bought for me, a symbol of his newfound acceptance of me and embrace of me. His face was blurry from a distance, and my first full sight of him was from the last time that I saw him years ago. And then, as if I nodded off for a moment, or the entire universe hiccuped, he morphed into an older man, the man he would be if I had saw him today. I shouted, "No! No!" With each shout, my voice grew hoarse, my mouth grew heavy. The sound coming out seemed to bubble away as if I were yelling underwater. I started to try to shake and struggle, even though I knew I was carrying a bomb. My mother appeared next to my father, and finally my long-dead cat seemed to hop from nowhere onto my mom's shoulder. And that's all that I wanted to see, right there. That's all I wanted. This was my Christmas morning, an impossible Christmas morning. The Christmas morning in heaven that Sunday school told me about. If I was about to die from some kind of lake monster, surely this is the afterlife that awaited me. Perhaps I should embrace it. My dad's face ever coming into focus as I dredged forth through snow, over seemingly abandoned cars by stiff legs became fractal for a moment. The weird digital scanner from a damaged television or monitor, his face turned from smiling to rigid in anger and then back to smiling. A voice in the panicked part of my brain was my dad, and it told me I was going to hell. And it told me I would burn forever unless I saw Christ, and that he wouldn't burn for me, and he wouldn't let my mom burn for me. So I had to be gone, because of the scriptures. And in his deep voice I heard, "If your right eye causes you to sin, cut it out." Yada, yada. It was then I had a moment of thought. I remember what Mike said about how he couldn't see. I couldn't move my arms or my hands much. I was already using all my remaining willpower to slow my walk. It was then something quite loud and bright jarred me, flash blasted me out of this trance. It must have been Mike's bomb going off. And for all of 5 seconds, I could hear the wind and feel the snow and see the darkness of the night in my left eye and the sunrise in my dad and the birds in the sun in my other. In those precious seconds, my left hand and arm responded to my panicked brain, and I was able to shift just enough to reach into my pocket. I didn't grab my phone. I grabbed the one thing I thought could save me. I felt the cold cylinder in my hand as I turned the aperture side towards me and thumbed maniacally for the rubber on button. I took my best guess at aiming, and the first pass over my left eye, stunned with blue and black blur and stinging pain. For that moment I had even more control over my mind and body. I was able to stop the movement of my left leg entirely, and I slipped and fell into the snow. Amazed the bomb glued to my chest and hand didn't go off, I noticed my vision slowly restore, and with that I was coerced, convinced again to stand and shamble through the snow towards my doom, towards my dad. I managed another pass across my left eye. This time I felt like a wasp had landed on it and stung directly into the pupil. It sent waves of agony coursing through my head, and yet I had no choice but to try to zap my right eye as well. I used the next few seconds to summon the strength to press the laser almost directly onto my eyeball. Lens to lens, I managed 2 quick passes with the beam on full. I drew an X over my right eye. My sight grew dark and darker, with blackish blotch in the center of my eye and reddish-gray aura around it. A skull-crushing headache wrapped around the right side of my face, down to my ear, which started to ring with tinnitus. To my amazement, my left eye seemed to be recovering, and before long I lost total control over my left side, and I dropped the laser pointer. My left leg tried to find its footing, even as I tried to sit on my right side. I fumbled desperately through the snow, my hands alternating between numb and burning, trying to find the laser pointer. I felt it, and with one concentrated effort, I gave my left eye the same treatment as my right. Earth-shattering pain rocked me again. I blinked twice, and in the last flashes of my natural vision, I saw it. It was a glowing in the dark with an eerie glow-stick-like softness. It was a glowing white and blue bag of warty flesh riddled with pinprick holes and bumps. It seemed to breathe rapidly, inflating sharp spikes out of its many holes with each breath like a pufferfish. It had 2 pearly brown and iridescent reptilian eyes which sat on the top of its head. They were disproportionate and bulging, like something out of a Sesame Street Muppet. The flat black pupils on each one dilated and contracted rapidly, and at times they seemed less like eyes and more like mouths. Its entire mass, about the size of a large bear, floated in midair, a few feet off the ground in what could only be described as a mashup between legs and fins. In all, I could say that it resembled a cross between a pufferfish and a toad. It trained its mouthy eyes on me with cold indifference, and it seemed to say in some way in the back of my head, "If not this fly, then any other will do. If not this food, then any other food." Then the creature seemed to fold itself in half, then half again, getting smaller and flatter each time it folded, until it was thin as a sheet of paper, and floated down, back into the water and out of sight. I knew the creature's attack was over because I could scream again. I screamed and wrestled with the pain as I collapsed to both knees again and then fell flat on my back. I turned to my side only to vomit, and I don't remember exactly what happened afterwards. I played 20 questions with the police and Homeland Security about the bomb that went off, and the apparently non-functional device that Mike stuck me with. I have to stress the term non-functional, as it simply didn't work as intended. The bomb he superglued to me was otherwise 100% real. I told them what I knew for sure, and I told them my lies. I told them Mike was insane and blinded me with my laser pointer and sent me stumbling out into the snow with a bomb glued to me. The agent from Homeland Security told me Mike had not yet turned up, and that I was being set up as a patsy for a terrorist attack on an unknown target. When he left, the remaining cop told me in no uncertain terms that they were expecting Mike to turn up in a day or two, because they always do, after a snowstorm, next to the lake. I don't know why Mike was unsuccessful. He was vulnerable. The creature could not be that smart, and even if it was, would it be so smart as to successfully deflect both of us? I guess that's the question I'm after now. If it was, did I have to burn my eyes out? If Mike threw his bomb away and was still eaten, then what does that mean for me? Sometime in the blurry haze of painkillers and blotchy darkness, and the reddish light that is now my world, my mother arrived. And by that time, or because it was her, the story of how I got there was told. It's not that exciting, but apparently some brave soul dragged me into their SUV and kept me warm until rescue came in the morning in the form of a passing snowmobile patrol. It was sometime after that I was parked in front of the hospital window towards the lake. From what I was told by the nurse, the grooves I carved into my eyes scarred up into 2 jagged X's. The scar tissue was pressing on my eyelids, and one day I may need additional surgery. She said in time I may regain a bit of peripheral vision, but until then, for my sake, the sake of my headaches, and for the sake of people who might look at me, I should keep them shut. I think anyone else would be pretty low at this point. I was blind and hideously deformed. Everything was up in the air. My world was turned upside down. The one thing was, after all these years, this one tragic encounter brought my mother back to my life. And so I casually asked the nurse if she could ask my mom to come visit me in the room I was in. She told me my mother wasn't there. She told me they made contact with my mother, but she told them she wasn't able to come. And then I realized what had happened. And I asked the nurse to open the blinds. She asked me how I could tell the blinds were shut, and I just told her I knew. I could feel the sun on my skin, and my blotchy vision grew sharper as the outlines of the X's etched into my vision reminded me of reticles from gun sights. Far and away in the perceived distance, I could see the monster, regurgitating its victims into neat piles along the lakeshore. After each one, I could see it stop to look up at me. A swarm of little orbs surrounded it. They swam around and looked like little tadpoles. It was out there right now, waiting for the next snowstorm to cover its predations and the predations of its young. It's a deadly predator. Traps it on the flypaper tongue, stuck there with our own regrets. It's efficient, but it's far from indifferent. However, it made a fatal mistake when it failed to kill me. It's made an additional mistake in taunting me, because now I'm twice immune to it. I have this monster in my Crosseyes, and I will destroy it.